Hi, I'm Micah Halpern. Thank you for joining me today as I do some thinking out loud. Our first segment is called Background Briefing. The first thing I've been thinking about is Prime Minister Netanyahu was not the only Middle East leader to take a road trip recently. And despite all the hoopla about the speech, his was probably not the most important message being delivered. More important, although much less sensational and therefore much less covered by the press, was the visit of Abdullah, King of Jordan, to his newly crowned counterpart and neighbor in Riyadh. And then there was a visit several days later of al-Sisi, the president of Egypt, who also met with Salman, the new king of Saudi Arabia. After the formalities were dispensed with, the real business at hand began. And in each of those meetings, like Netanyahu in Washington, one important topic under discussion was Iran. Then came ISIS. It is hugely important for us to understand and to remember that when it comes to these sensitive subjects, Israel does not stand alone. These Arab countries, Jordan, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia, are all also sworn enemies of both ISIS and Iran. These meetings by Middle East leaders, rulers, to be more specific, they're actually monarchs and dictators, but they were held in the region itself, and they were extremely important. You see, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt are all part of a coalition against ISIS. And yes, all three have strong relations with the U.S. But more than anything else, these two monarchs, as well as the Egyptian president, are all in the crosshairs of ISIS. They all know that ISIS wants to take over their countries. And they are keenly aware that there are already individual people as well as organized groups inside each of their countries who are affiliated with ISIS and with al-Qaeda. The violence is growing, and it is reaching critical mass. Each leader came with the same plan in mind, and I know you should know that. In the course of their meetings, the two kings and the president agreed to increase their cooperation against ISIS, even outside the coalition with the United States. They have no choice. They agreed to step up and strike ISIS and al-Qaeda, to support one another and to share information. We know all this because they chose to leak it to their domestic Arabic press. You see, they understand that. For them, fighting ISIS is a battle of survival. Abdullah of Jordan and Salman of Saudi Arabia know very well that in order for their reigns to survive, they must defeat ISIS. We also know from the official sources that the Egyptian-Saudi conversation was very straightforward. Egypt wanted to make certain that the new king, like Abdullah, the previous king of Saudi Arabia, continues to support him both politically and monetarily. And both countries needed to make certain that they share information, intel on terror and the Islamic extremists. From information and leaks, we know that they decided to create a joint force to confront the new challenge from ISIS in Iraq and in Syria, and to control the tension emerging out of Libya and Yemen. Add Jordan to the mix, and we know that they have a move to unify Arabs against ISIS and the threat of ISIS. That's big news. You see, in the beginning, the collaboration will probably be limited to intelligence and training. But if successful, the links will grow, and these countries will actually help each other out on joint missions on the ground and from the air. Salman and al-Sisi and Abdullah need to work well together. There is no other option. What they do and say will have tremendous impact on the rest of the Arab world. They can convey a sense of stability or not. They can create a sense of mission and vision and draw people away from ISIS, or they will fail and their monarchies will be in tumult. Egypt and Saudi Arabia and Jordan all come with essential and powerful, important skill sets. Saudi Arabia is the richest, Egypt is the most populous, and Jordan has one of the highest adult literacy rates in the region at 97%. They all have clout. The only way to defeat ISIS or defeat Iran is if the Arabs and the Muslims in the neighborhood actually work together. And now, they finally see these new threats as serious challenges to their very existence. And they are now strategizing on how to confront it. We should wish them luck. Now, there's also a big hiccup, a major hiccup in this thesis, a thesis that I very much like and I hope that it will come to fruition. The hiccup is that for some reason, and I cannot understand that reason, nor can I get a real sense of an explanation, but the Saudis dressed down al-Sisi in their media after the meeting. They berated him, and there were several pieces in the Saudi press about it. Why would they do such a thing, especially in light of the thesis I just developed? My normal point of view would say, well, it's simply a burp or a hiccup. But because the King of Saudi Arabia is new, and because he's reshuffling his team, I hope that he's not thinking of doing something that would alter the status quo that Saudi Arabia has been in place for such a long time. I say this because a fourth leader came to Saudi Arabia recently also. Erdogan of Turkey visited the king. We have no real details of what happened in the meeting. We can assume that Saudi Arabia and Turkey spoke about ISIS and the new reality that Turkey is now no longer simply sitting on the side and watching and hoping that ISIS kills as many Kurds as possible. That was Turkey's original agenda. Now, today, it's clear that ISIS has snuck sleeper cells into Turkey. They have infiltrated their major cities. That's a problem. Let me be clear. ISIS cannot be defeated or even seriously confronted unless it is done so by Arabs and Muslims in the region. And with the announcement that Boko Haram is now swearing allegiance to ISIS, they have gained a huge amount of momentum. Again, Boko Haram is that Nigerian terrorist group that has been persecuting Nigerians for the past few years. So swearing allegiance to ISIS, this should come as no surprise. The broadcast came in Arabic, announcing that the Nigerian group is now fighting together with ISIS and supports Baghdadi as the caliph, or the general leader over all of Islam. Here's the quote. "We announce our allegiance to the caliph and will hear and obey in times of difficulty and prosperity." The Pledge of Allegiance was attributed to Boko Haram's leader, Abu Bakr Shakir. Boko Haram is a Nigerian-based terror group that has been terrorizing and fighting in Nigeria for several years. Their name says everything. Boko means book in Nigerian, in this Nigerian dialect. And Haram means forbidden in many, many different languages. Boko Haram means books are forbidden. It is a major attack against women's learning. The entire purpose of the name of the group is to stop the education of women. In the year 2015, that is unbelievable. And yet, one must not forget that there was someone else who visited Saudi Arabia at the same time as Bibi was speaking in Washington. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry came to Saudi Arabia to discuss the same topics, Iran and ISIS. Kerry arrived in Saudi Arabia after 3 days of nuclear talks. To put it more accurately, 3 days of negotiations with Iran. Kerry said that there are still very large gaps between the parties. Over and over again, we see that Iran really understands the United States. The Iranians know that the Obama administration really wants a deal. They want something on paper. It doesn't matter much if that's a good deal or a bad deal. The Israelis, however, their point of view is slightly different. They're saying that a bad deal means that they will be destroyed. The United States does not feel the same way. The administration is not moved by that statement. Diplomats know this. The Middle East knows this. It's important that we know it also. Saudi Arabia is critically important as a player in every issue in the Middle East. They must be brought into the inner circle, and their role is very important. Whatever happens must involve Saudi Arabia. We are seeing it play out right now. Coming up next, Points of View. Here's what some important voices have been talking about. First up is a column by Stephen Carter, published in Bloomberg View. Bloomberg View is part of their very successful website where columnists and bloggers pitch ideas and start some very interesting conversations. It is a modern form of the editorial page. Like so many other websites, here on Bloomberg Views, the feedback from the readers is very interesting. As an aside, and my asides are very interesting, at least to me, as an aside, people always ask me if I pay attention to feedback. And some of my fellow columnists tell me not to pay any attention to them, to the talkback sections. I'll be honest with you, I love to see what people are saying and how they respond. Not just to my material and ideas, but of others as well. Of course, there's a certain amount of vitriol and bile and real hatred that spews forth. I don't pay attention to that. But I love the ideas and the exchanges of ideas that emerge as a result of columns and shows on the internet that people can respond to. So this piece by Stephen Carter, he's a columnist in Bloomberg, but he's also a law professor at Yale. Carter's piece is entitled, "Meddling in Iran Talks is Congress's Job." It was posted on March 5th, 2015, and published across U.S. newspapers in print for at least 4 days following. Let's say it ran in the New York Post on March 7th. Carter's thesis is clear from the outset. Congress is supposed to intervene. They have a history of it, and it's part of their job description. Carter begins, "Put aside the overheated spat about the wisdom of inviting Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to address a joint session of Congress this week. The deeper constitutional issue involves the insistence by President Barack Obama the House and Senate have no business floating sanctions bills that might upset the administration's negotiations over Iran's nuclear program. The truth is that there is nothing remotely unusual going on. Congress has pressured presidents to change their approaches to foreign policy for as long as the country has existed. This sort of interplay among branches is exactly what the framers expected." Now, Carter gives 3 important examples from the recent past in order to prove his point. Carter describes Jimmy Carter's advances to China and how Congress was upset that Taiwan was going to be let out. They're going to be terribly hurt. So enormous pressure was placed by Congress on the White House, including the Taiwan Relations Act. Professor Carter shows the example of Ronald Reagan next, who engaged in what they called constructive engagement with South Africa. Well, Congress worked to curb that. They didn't like that. Then Bush 41, or as they call him in Israel, and in Hebrew, Bush Ha'av, that is, Bush the father, George Herbert Walker Bush, stepped into the Cambodian, Vietnam, and China issue. When the U.S. insisted that Cambodians in exile hold the UN seat, Congress literally went berserk. Carter ends his piece by saying, and this is a profound quote about the relationship between the legislative and executive branches. He says, quote, "We can argue long and hard over the proper contours of the deal with Tehran, but it's wrong to suggest that Congress is misbehaving when it insists on protecting its prerogatives. Battles between the executive and the legislative branches over foreign policy are as old as the Republic. If the outcome of the current fight is a restriction of the freedom of this or a future president to go his own way, that's a feature, not a bug." This is a spectacular column. Professor Carter explains the interplay and the importance of the give and take, and gives plenty of historical proof that healthy debate should exist concerning foreign policy. Shutting down the discussion is bad, not good. Second up is a column from the New York Times and is by Roger Cohen. Cohen is a regular columnist. He recently returned from an extended trip to Israel. From the tone and topics of his columns written from Israel and written from New York City, I can say with almost absolute certainty that he was wined and dined and brought into the inner circle of Haaretz. Haaretz sees itself as the New York Times of Israel. Haaretz is the intellectuals' paper, the paper of culture and of letters. It is a great paper and is extremely left of center, and they have a serious bone to pick with Prime Minister Netanyahu. In this column, Cohen laces into Netanyahu and his approach to Iran. It is not simply about his speech to Congress. That would be too monodimensional for Cohen. Cohen has a problem with Netanyahu's entire perspective about Iran. Cohen asserts that it is unclear and does not promote a solution at all. That's Netanyahu's point of view. So Cohen starts the discussion. Let's begin with Benjamin Netanyahu's Iran logic, he says. He portrays a rampaging Islamic republic that now dominates 4 Arab capitals, Baghdad, Damascus, Beirut, and Sana'a, a nation gobbling other countries on the march of conquest, subjugation, and terror. Then in the same speech, he describes Iran as a very vulnerable regime on the brink of folding. Well, which is it? Cohen asks. Cohen explains that Netanyahu suggests that maintaining pressure and sanctions will do the trick. And that is being done already. So Cohen asks, where are the new ideas that are going to bring about a different and better deal or solution? He continues, so where's the leverage to secure that much better deal? Unquote. Cohen called Netanyahu's point of view fear-mongering. And then Cohen concludes with a biting personal attack against Bibi and against Congress. Now I'm going to read this very slowly. It is powerful. This is how he says. He continues with this. Among foreign leaders, nobody has been invited to address Congress more often than Netanyahu. He now stands equal with Winston Churchill. Behind Netanyahu trail Nelson Mandela and Yitzhak Rabin. That's a pretty devastating commentary on the state of contemporary American political culture and the very notion of leadership. Wow. That's how he ends. This final set of lines was a serious slap in the face, in Bibi's face and in the face of Congress. Not only does Cohen disagree with Netanyahu's point of view on Iran, which, by the way, is not too dissimilar than the left in Israel, but he also lashes into Congress for even inviting him, not just now, but having invited him in the past, suggesting what kind of leaders would be foolish enough to do that. Coming up next, commentary through cartoons, where pictures tell the story. In this section, I want to show a few election ads. We've watched some ads before, but election ads help show the character of the campaign. They are great vehicles to understand the parties and their point of view and their platforms. That's the case, by the way, before, after, and during elections. So we're going to watch 3 short political commercials. The first is a Likud ad starring Netanyahu. It has gone viral. It's called Bibi Sitter and makes a pun on babysitter. Even Jon Stewart did a hilarious piece on it where he says, first of all, this is his quote, first of all, I'm surprised that the Hebrew word for babysitter is babysitter. And he concludes that Jews can't be very funny in every country, unquote. This is a very funny piece. It runs 71 seconds. I disagree with Jon Stewart, actually. It's spectacular. Netanyahu comes in as a babysitter to take care of the kids as parents go out. They're shocked. The parents are shocked as Netanyahu comes in and offers to babysit their kids. Netanyahu says, well, maybe you prefer the other candidates to come and watch your kids instead. The parents say, no way. Our kids would be looking after those candidates, not them caring for our kids. The whole ad concludes the way all Likud ads end. It's either us or them.
ממי, למתי הזמנת את הבייביסיטר? אנחנו מאחרים.
הממשלה. איזה כבוד. מה אתה עושה פה?
הזמנתם בייביסיטר? קיבלתם ביביסיטר. איפה הילדים?
אבל אתה ראש הממשלה. אתה תשמור לנו על הילדים?
תראו, זה או אני, או ציפי ובוז'י.
לא. בוז'י, הילדים שלנו צריכים לשמור עליו.
עד שנחזור לא יהיה לנו בית.
הוא אפילו ימסור את השטיחים. וציפי?
ציפי, שעתיים במקום אחד.
עד שתחזרו, היא בטח כבר תעבור לשכנים. בבחירות הקרובות, אתם בוחרים מי ישמור על הילדים שלנו. בבחירות הקרובות, מצביעים רק הליכוד. די, ציפי.
שלום.
לא בכל תנאי.
The next commercial is from the Zionist camp, the other large party. Actually, it's a merged party. This ad is in Hebrew, but there's no knowledge of Hebrew necessary to understand the point. The ad simply asks the question, can you think of a single good thing Bibi has done in the past 9 years? And then everyone answers with the classic Israeli expression. It ends by saying, don't allow nothing to happen again. So here, as we're about to watch the ad, remember the question, can you think of a single good thing that Bibi has done?
את יכולה להגיד לי בבקשה דבר אחד טוב שביבי עשה?
דבר אחד טוב.
אולי, לא.
אולי מה... לא,
9 שנים של... כלום. נכשלת? הביתה. ב-17 במרץ מחליפים את ביבי.
Finally, this last ad is also in Hebrew, but has no words. It's for United Torah Judaism, UTJ. Its letter in the election ballot box is Gimel. You vote by letters, so it's Gimel. So you see a big Gimel there. The scene is on the foosball table. Foosball is miniature soccer on the table. Israelis love soccer, or football as they call it. Now, United Torah Judaism, the player is actually the goalie and defending against all the other parties. Each ball represents an issue. So one ball comes down and it's written on it, yeshiva draft. Another says conversion. Another says financial assistance for large families with many children. And the pun is, of course, that the Hebrew word for goalie is shomer, or guard. And that's how the ad ends, with the expression that the only group strong enough to guard Israel, not the state, but the Jewish people, is United Torah Judaism. In a moment, my own perspective and a few predictions. I am shocked by the responses to Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu's speech, so much so that I am jokingly wondering if I missed the parts of the speech that everyone else is criticizing. And to know me is to know that I missed nothing. So I'm not just talking about Pelosi saying that she was insulted or Obama saying there was nothing new. That I expected. The purpose of the speech given by Netanyahu was not to divulge new material. Actually, that's why he said you could Google all the things and all the information anyway. The Israeli prime minister has often been criticized for leaking details, so he was not deliberately going to do that again. Before the entire world and announce state secrets, doing that would be both illegal in the United States and in Israel. So interestingly, Al Arabiya, a major Arabic network, had a very positive column saying how on target Netanyahu was. Their report was that the Prime Minister of Israel described the Iranian threat perfectly. The Palestinian President Abbas said that Bibi accurately described the explosive nature of the Middle East. His message has not changed in over a decade. It's the same threat. It's just becoming more threatening. The speech was not supposed to change people's minds. The purpose of Netanyahu's speech before Congress was to remind people of the danger, the very grave danger posed by Iran, and to explain why there is a difference between the U.S. point of view and the Israeli point of view. And in that, Netanyahu succeeded. On another topic, let me explain. The Iraqi Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities announced on their Facebook page that ISIS was destroying more archaeological sites. ISIS destroyed the ancient archaeological site of Nimrod, also known as the biblical city of Nimrod, named after the character from Genesis 10. Nimrod was one of the capitals of the Assyrian Empire. It was there that Sennacherib built his palace. In the ancient world, there was always a movement between Nimrod and Nineveh, which is less than a mile away. They were like sister cities. Nineveh is famous as a biblical city because that's where the book of Jonah took place, right? And that's where the burial place of Jonah was also until ISIS destroyed that. ISIS destroyed Nineveh about a year ago. And now they've destroyed Nimrod also. According to the Iraqi government, ISIS bulldozed the site. This is such an amazing site that major sections of the site were removed to London to be housed in the British Museum, where they've been since the 1840s when they were originally excavated. We've been thinking out loud about a lot today. Now that you know what I've been thinking, let me know what you're thinking. Email me at micah@jbstv.org. Tweet me at Micah Halpern. Tell me what you think. Before we end, let me leave you with one piquant piece of information. We've spoken in the past about the great Sanhedrin, the Jewish court, and how they voted. They sat in concentric circles, and people raised their pinkies and said, Ani melamed zchut. The word for voting in Hebrew is matzbia, and it's derived from that very experience of lifting up the finger. The etymology of the word for voting comes from the word for finger, which means eitzba. One raised their finger in acclamation. This is very different than the word in Latin. The English word for voting in Latin comes from the word to swear, which means votim. Hardly the same idea, and certainly not the same orientation. What's closer to that word probably is suffrage. Suffrage is the movement to have the right to vote. Suffrage probably derives from the Latin word to support an idea. So I raise my eitzba and matzbia. I vote for you, the viewer, because it's your voice, vox populi, that counts. Thank you for thinking out loud with me, Micah Halpern. Let's think out loud again next week on JBS.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS, the Jewish Broadcasting Service, with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the JBS homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to Jem, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.